My wife vanished with a note, "Don't follow me, I'm done." So I sold her car, changed the locks, and booked a cruise. 1 week later, she showed up at my doorstep begging with our joint credit cards maxed out. I never imagined I'd come home from adjusting a routine commercial property claim to find my entire life dismantled by a single piece of notebook paper torn from one of her yoga journals. The handwritten note sat precisely centered on our dining room table, weighted down by Samantha's wedding ring and house keys like some twisted museum exhibit of failed marriage. I read it 4 times before the words fully registered. "Marcus, I can't do this anymore. I need to disappear and find myself away from everything that's holding me back. Don't follow me or try to contact me. I'm done with this marriage and everything it represents. I need complete freedom to become who I'm supposed to be without your constant planning and expectations suffocating me." The clinical detachment in her careful handwriting matched the cold finality of leaving her rings behind, as if our 7 years together were just another item to be discarded during spring cleaning. Instead of calling her friends or family in a panic like most abandoned husbands would, I walked through our suburban Philadelphia home methodically with the same analytical mind I used for insurance investigations, noting what was missing: her favorite clothes, expensive toiletries, laptop, passport, and the vintage leather suitcase we'd bought for our honeymoon in Ireland. I should have felt devastated or desperate, but instead I felt something else entirely: the same cold clarity I experienced when examining fire damage, seeing patterns others missed. Those suspicious late-night phone calls she claimed were work emergencies, the unexplained yoga classes that mysteriously lasted 4 hours, the way she'd started criticizing everything about our carefully planned life together while offering no constructive solutions, it all crystallized into a pattern I'd been too trusting and optimistic to see clearly before now. By 8 p.m. that same evening, I'd photographed her note from multiple angles for documentation, cataloged the abandoned belongings, and started making strategic phone calls with the same methodical approach I used for complex claims. First, I called Dave's Auto Sales and told him Samantha's beloved vintage Mustang convertible was available for immediate purchase, cash only, no financing negotiations, price to move within 24 hours. "That's a beautiful car, Marcus," Dave said over the phone with obvious confusion. "You absolutely sure about selling it?" Always seemed like Samantha's pride and joy whenever I saw her driving around town. "Samantha's no longer in the picture and won't be needing transportation," I replied calmly, watching the empty driveway where her cherry-red convertible should have been parked. "I need it gone by tomorrow afternoon." The $23,000 cash sale gave me exactly the funds I needed for Phase 2 of my response plan: hiring Patricia Morrison, the most aggressively effective divorce attorney in the city, known throughout Philadelphia's legal community for her absolutely scorched-earth approach to matrimonial warfare. By Thursday morning, I'd methodically changed every lock on the house, canceled Samantha's cell phone line and removed her from our shared accounts, then transferred our emergency savings fund into my personal account to book a luxurious 2-week Mediterranean cruise departing the following Sunday from New York. "Don't you want to wait and see if she changes her mind and comes back?" my concerned neighbor Mrs. Henderson asked while I was installing the 3rd new deadbolt on our front door. "She made her choice very clear in writing," I said, testing the lock mechanism with satisfaction. "I'm just respecting her explicit wishes and moving forward accordingly." While enjoying gourmet meals and shore excursions across Italy and Greece, I received increasingly frantic messages from Samantha's sister Jessica and mutual friends asking about her whereabouts, but I calmly explained that Samantha chose to leave and requested no contact, sharing photos of her note as proof. The Mediterranean cruise turned out to be exactly what I needed: structured activities, excellent food, and the kind of peaceful routine that let me process everything without constant reminders of our failed marriage cluttering my thoughts. I'd wake up each morning to room service coffee and fresh pastries, spend my days exploring ancient ruins in Rome and Athens, then return to the ship for 5-course dinners and evening entertainment that required no emotional investment whatsoever. On the 3rd day, while enjoying breakfast on the ship's deck overlooking the Italian coastline, my phone buzzed with the first wave of concerned messages. "Marcus, where is Samantha? She missed our lunch date and isn't answering her phone," Jessica texted, followed immediately by "Mom's worried sick. Please call us." I took a photo of Samantha's note and replied, Samantha left this on our dining table along with her keys and wedding ring. She specifically requested no contact and said she needed to find herself. I'm respecting her wishes. The response was immediate and predictably dramatic. What do you mean she left? You can't just let your wife disappear. But I'd learned something valuable about setting boundaries. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is actually listen when someone tells you exactly what they want. By the 5th day, anchored off the coast of Santorini, our mutual friends had joined the interrogation campaign. Mike from our book club called while I was touring a winery. Dude, this doesn't sound like Samantha at all. Something's wrong. You need to file a missing person report. Mike, she left a detailed note explaining her intentions and took her passport, suitcase, and personal belongings. That's not a missing person. That's someone who chose to leave. The silence on the other end told me he was processing this information differently than he'd expected. During a particularly quiet evening on the ship's upper deck, watching the sunset paint the Mediterranean in brilliant oranges and purples, I decided to do something I probably should have done months ago: investigate what Samantha had actually been doing during all those suspicious absences. I logged into our shared cloud storage account and started scrolling through months of photos, documents, and data that painted a picture I'd been too trusting to see. What I found was a secret Instagram account under the handle @SamanthaFreeSpirit that she'd apparently been maintaining for over 8 months, documenting what she called her awakening journey and escape from suburban mediocrity. The posts were a chronicle of someone preparing to abandon their life, photos of inspirational quotes about breaking free from toxic relationships, pictures of tropical destinations tagged with future home, and dozens of comments from someone named Alex whose profile showed him as a yoga instructor with perfectly sculpted abs and a man bun. I scrolled deeper into their exchange, my detective instincts fully engaged now, and discovered months of deleted messages that she'd carelessly backed up to our shared cloud. The conversations revealed their affair had begun 8 months ago at her yoga studio, where Alex worked as what he called a spiritual wellness coach, and included detailed discussions about Samantha draining our joint accounts to fund their escape to Costa Rica, where they planned to open a holistic healing retreat. I can't keep living this lie with Marcus, she'd written to Alex in February. He's so boring and predictable, always planning everything to death. You make me feel alive and spontaneous for the first time in years. Alex's responses were even more revealing. Baby, once you transfer the money from your joint accounts, we can disappear to paradise and start our real life together. I've already found the perfect beachfront property in Manuel Antonio. I methodically screenshot every conversation, every photo, every financial discussion, creating a comprehensive digital evidence file while sipping wine and watching the Greek islands drift past my cabin window. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Samantha was somewhere executing her grand escape plan with her yoga instructor, I was building an ironclad legal case against her using the same methodical approach she'd always criticized me for having. I returned home from my Mediterranean cruise to find Samantha waiting on my front porch like a discarded package, disheveled and crying, with 3 maxed-out credit cards scattered around her feet like fallen leaves from the tree of financial ruin. Her appearance shocked me. The confident woman who'd left that note had been replaced by someone who looked like she'd been sleeping in airports for days, her usually perfect hair unwashed and tangled, designer clothes wrinkled and stained with what looked like coffee and tears. She'd lost at least 15 pounds, her face gaunt and hollow-eyed, clutching a crumpled tissue in one hand and her phone in the other like lifelines that had already failed her. Marcus, thank God you're home, she sobbed, scrambling to her feet as I approached the front door with my luggage. I've been waiting here for 6 hours. I didn't know where else to go. The locks are different and my keys don't work. I stood on my own front walkway, studying this broken version of my wife with the same analytical detachment I'd used to assess storm damage, noting every detail of her deterioration while keeping my expression carefully neutral. The locks changed because you abandoned the marital home, I said calmly, pulling out my phone to record the conversation. What are you doing here, Samantha? I made a terrible mistake, she said, her voice cracking with desperation. Alex convinced me to max out all our credit cards to fund our trip to Costa Rica. He said it was an investment in our future together, that we'd pay everything back once we got established down there and started the wellness retreat business. She gestured helplessly at the scattered credit cards. I transferred $47,000 to his account for what he called startup capital, but then he abandoned me at the Miami airport after I gave him the money. Just disappeared while I was in the bathroom, left me with no cash, no return ticket, and no way to contact him. I listened to this story with growing amazement at the sheer stupidity of it all, maintaining my position on the other side of the security chain I'd installed on the front door. So Alex took your money and left you stranded, I summarized. That's unfortunate. It's not just unfortunate, Marcus, it's devastating. I lost everything. Our savings, our credit, our future, all for someone who never actually loved me. He was just using me the entire time. The irony of her complaint wasn't lost on me, but I kept my expression neutral while she continued her confession. I had to call Jessica to wire me money for a flight home, and I've been living in my car for the past 3 days because I don't have anywhere else to go. The hotel kicked me out when my credit cards were declined, and I can't afford even a cheap motel room. She stepped closer to the door, desperation radiating from every movement. Please, Marcus, I know I hurt you terribly, but I need to come inside. I need to shower, eat something, sleep in a real bed. I'll do anything to make this right between us. I studied her through the security chain, noting how her desperation had completely transformed her from the confident woman who'd criticized my predictable lifestyle into someone utterly broken by her own impulsive choices. You legally abandoned this marital home when you left that note stating you were done with our marriage, I explained patiently. You have no legal right to enter this property anymore. But I'm still your wife. We're still married. Actually, Patricia Morrison filed divorce papers the day after you left. You'll be served officially once they locate your current address. Her face went white. You filed for divorce already? Without even trying to work things out. You left a note saying you were done with our marriage and everything it represented. I took you at your word and acted accordingly. She pressed her face against the security chain, tears streaming down her cheeks. I was confused and scared and making terrible decisions. I thought I wanted freedom, but I was wrong about everything. Alex, the money, leaving you, all of it was a horrible mistake that I'll regret for the rest of my life. That sounds like something you should discuss with a therapist, I replied, shouldering my cruise luggage and moving toward my newly secured front door. I hope you figure everything out, Samantha, but you can't do it here. Samantha's attempt to contest the divorce through a bargain basement attorney she found on Craigslist failed spectacularly when Patricia Morrison presented my comprehensive evidence file, including the secret social media accounts, documented money transfers to Alex, and witness statements from neighbors who'd seen her loading suitcases into his car on the day she disappeared. The court proceedings turned into a masterclass in legal preparation versus desperate improvisation, with Patricia methodically presenting months of meticulously organized evidence while Samantha's inexperienced lawyer fumbled through hastily prepared arguments that directly contradicted the documented facts. Your Honor, Patricia began during the preliminary hearing, opening a thick 3-ring binder of documentation that took 2 paralegals to carry. My client's spouse engaged in systematic financial fraud and deliberate abandonment of the marital home. We have extensive digital evidence showing Mrs. Marcus planned this departure for nearly 8 months while actively concealing assets and forging signatures on multiple financial documents without her husband's knowledge or consent. She presented printouts of every Instagram message, every financial transfer, every lie Samantha had told about working late while actually planning her elaborate escape with Alex. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Walsh who clearly had no patience for financial games or matrimonial fraud, examined each piece of evidence with growing disapproval and obvious irritation. Mrs. Marcus, did you or did you not write this handwritten note explicitly stating you were done with your marriage and wanted no contact? She asked sharply. Yes, but Your Honor, I was having what I now recognize as a severe mental health crisis and wasn't thinking clearly about the long-term consequences of my actions, Samantha replied, her voice shaking as she sat next to her clearly overwhelmed public defender who kept shuffling papers nervously. The evidence suggests this was a carefully calculated plan executed systematically over many months. Judge Walsh responded dryly, holding up bank statements and credit reports, including opening secret credit lines, transferring marital assets to a third party, and forging your spouse's signature on financial documents. Patricia continued her devastating presentation with the precision of a skilled surgeon, revealing how Samantha had forged my signature on 3 separate credit card applications, created false employment records to secure additional lines of credit, and even attempted to secretly refinance our house without my knowledge or consent just 2 weeks before abandoning our marriage for her yoga instructor. The most damaging evidence came directly from Samantha's own digital trail, text messages where she bragged to Alex about bleeding Marcus dry before he catches on, and Instagram posts celebrating her ability to fund her freedom journey without me discovering her deception. Her bargain basement attorney, a nervous young man named Kevin who looked fresh out of law school and completely overwhelmed by the complexity of the case, clearly hadn't prepared for this level of comprehensive documentation. Your Honor, my client was emotionally manipulated and financially exploited by this Alex individual and made poor decisions under severe psychological duress, he argued weakly, reading from notes scribbled on a yellow legal pad. The evidence shows your client was an active and willing participant in planning and executing elaborate financial fraud over many months, Patricia countered with devastating precision. She wasn't an innocent victim of manipulation. She was a calculating accomplice who happened to get betrayed by her equally dishonest partner in crime. The judge's ruling came swift and brutal. Mrs. Marcus, you voluntarily abandoned your marital home, committed deliberate financial fraud, and systematically dissipated marital assets for personal gain. This court finds your actions constitute willful misconduct that directly and intentionally caused the irreparable breakdown of your marriage. Samantha's lawyer abandoned the case entirely after the second hearing when he discovered she'd lied to him about virtually everything, leaving her to navigate the remaining legal proceedings with whatever free legal aid she could scramble to find. Meanwhile, the local yoga community where both Samantha and Alex had been prominent and respected members completely ostracized them both after the scandal became public knowledge through court documents that detailed their sordid affair and systematic financial crimes against multiple victims. I discovered that Alex didn't flee to Costa Rica as planned but was actually hiding in a seedy motel across town, having spent Samantha's money on gambling debts and drug purchases rather than their promised tropical escape to start a new life together. Through private investigator surveillance that Patricia recommended, I learned that Alex had been running identical romance scams on other married women from different yoga studios across 3 states, systematically targeting wives who seemed unhappy with their predictable suburban lives and had access to joint bank accounts. The investigator, a former police detective named Ray Martinez, showed me a comprehensive file detailing Alex's pattern of operation. He'd identify vulnerable married women at upscale yoga studios, spend months building emotional intimacy through spiritual guidance sessions, then convince them to fund elaborate escape plans that never materialized because he'd disappear with their money immediately after the transfers cleared. This guy's got it down to a science, Ray explained, showing me photos of Alex's current living situation at the Sunset Motel, a rundown establishment that charged by the week and didn't require credit checks. He's been doing this for at least 4 years that we can document, maybe longer. Your wife wasn't his first victim, and she probably wouldn't have been his last if he hadn't gotten greedy and attracted law enforcement attention. Ray's surveillance revealed that Alex was currently being pursued by both loan sharks for gambling debts accumulated at an illegal poker ring and federal law enforcement for wire fraud charges related to his systematic targeting of married women across state lines. The FBI's been building a case against him for months, Ray continued, flipping through photographs of Alex looking paranoid and constantly checking over his shoulder. Apparently 3 other wives from different states filed complaints after he pulled similar schemes on them. Your documentation and Samantha's testimony might be the final pieces they need to make arrests. Meanwhile, Samantha's situation had deteriorated from pathetic to genuinely dangerous as she attempted increasingly desperate methods to reconcile with me and restore her former lifestyle. She'd been living in her car after being evicted from a cheap extended-stay hotel, showing up at my workplace during lunch hours with elaborate explanations about how Alex had brainwashed her and how she'd do anything to earn my forgiveness and trust back. My colleagues at the insurance office began recognizing her as the disheveled woman who'd wait in the parking lot for hours, sometimes approaching other employees to ask about my schedule or personal life. "Marcus, there's a woman outside asking very specific questions about your daily routine," my supervisor Janet warned me during a particularly uncomfortable incident. "She seems to know a lot about your personal business and keeps insisting she's your wife who needs to speak with you urgently about a family emergency." The most disturbing escalation came when Samantha began contacting my family members with fabricated stories about mental health emergencies that required immediate intervention. She called my sister Linda in Ohio, claiming I was having a nervous breakdown and threatening self-harm, hoping Linda would pressure me to reconcile for the sake of my psychological well-being. "Marcus, Samantha called me crying about how worried she is about your mental state," Linda said during our weekly phone call. "She said you've been isolating yourself and making concerning statements about not wanting to live anymore. Is everything okay?" I had to explain the entire situation to Linda, including Samantha's abandonment, financial fraud, and current attempts at manipulation through false crisis reports. "She's been trying this approach with several family members," I told Linda. "It's another manipulation tactic designed to make people pressure me into taking her back out of concern for my welfare." The revelation that Samantha had been systematically manipulating my family members while planning her betrayal added another layer of calculated deception to her already extensive list of violations. My sister-in-law Rebecca revealed that Samantha had attempted to borrow money from multiple relatives months before leaving, claiming I was financially controlling her and she needed funds for what she called a women's empowerment retreat to regain her independence and self-confidence. "She made it sound like you were some kind of financial abuser," Rebecca explained apologetically. "She said you monitored every penny she spent and wouldn't let her have her own money for personal growth activities. We almost sent her $2,000 before my husband suggested we talk to you first." The systematic nature of Samantha's deception was breathtaking. She'd spent months poisoning my relationships with family members, creating false narratives about our marriage, and positioning herself as a victim of my supposed control while actually planning to rob me blind and disappear with her yoga instructor lover. The divorce settlement awarded me the house, both cars including the replacement vehicle I'd bought with the Mustang sale proceeds, and 80% of our remaining assets after the court determined Samantha's actions constituted financial abandonment and deliberate asset dissipation with criminal intent. Judge Walsh's final ruling was comprehensive and damning, establishing legal precedent for cases involving systematic matrimonial fraud combined with adultery and abandonment. Mr. Marcus demonstrated remarkable restraint and proper legal procedure in documenting his spouse's misconduct, she stated during the final hearing, while Mrs. Marcus engaged in deliberate criminal behavior designed to defraud her husband and dissolve their marriage for personal financial gain. The financial recovery exceeded my expectations because Patricia had successfully argued for punitive damages based on Samantha's forged signatures and fraudulent credit applications that had damaged my credit rating and required expensive legal remediation. Alex was arrested 3 weeks after our divorce finalization on multiple federal charges including wire fraud, identity theft, and operating a multi-state romance scam that had victimized at least 7 married women over 4 years, with total damages exceeding $340,000. The FBI's investigation revealed his elaborate system of targeting spiritually seeking wives at upscale yoga studios, building relationships through private meditation sessions, then convincing them to liquidate marital assets for fictional business ventures in exotic locations. He had a whole playbook, FBI agent Sarah Collins explained during my witness interview. Rent a nice car, lease expensive yoga studio space, create fake business documents for retreats in Costa Rica or Thailand, then disappear once the money transfers cleared. Your wife's case helped us establish the interstate wire fraud pattern we needed for federal prosecution. Samantha faced potential criminal charges for her role in forging my signature on multiple financial documents, though prosecutors ultimately offered her a plea deal involving restitution payments and community service in exchange for her cooperation in Alex's federal case. I used the insurance fraud recovery payout, which covered the unauthorized credit card charges and forged loan applications, to completely renovate the house and remove every trace of our shared life together. The master bedroom became a home office for the independent insurance consulting business I'd always planned to start. The formal dining room where she'd left that note transformed into a library with built-in bookshelves and a reading chair positioned to catch the morning sunlight. Every room got fresh paint, new furniture, and updated fixtures that reflected my personal taste rather than the compromised decorating we'd done as a couple. The house felt larger somehow, more peaceful, like it could finally breathe properly after years of tension and deception. During the renovation process, I reconnected with Catherine Walsh, a pediatric nurse I'd met during one of the shore excursions on my Mediterranean cruise who'd given me her contact information when we discovered our mutual love of historical architecture and travel photography. "I wasn't sure if you'd call," she admitted during our first dinner date back in Philadelphia, "but I kept thinking about our conversations at those Roman ruins. You had such an interesting perspective on everything, so thoughtful and analytical but also really passionate about the historical details most people miss." Catherine represented everything Samantha had never been: financially independent with her own successful career, genuinely curious about my work instead of just calculating its earning potential, and excited about building something together based on shared interests rather than lifestyle upgrades. She appreciated my methodical approach to planning trips and analyzing investment opportunities, seeing these traits as evidence of reliability and intelligence rather than boring predictability that needed to be escaped from. "I love that you actually research restaurants before we go," she told me after I'd planned a weekend trip to wine country complete with detailed itineraries and backup options. My ex-boyfriend used to just wander around hoping we'd stumble onto something good. It's so much more relaxing when someone actually thinks ahead. The house renovation was completed 6 months after the divorce finalization, transforming our former marital home into my personal sanctuary where I could build a new life based on honest communication, shared goals, and genuine partnership with someone who valued the same things I did. 6 months after the divorce finalization, I received a letter from Samantha postmarked from her parents' address in rural Pennsylvania, where she was apparently serving her court-ordered community service for financial fraud while working minimum-wage retail jobs to pay restitution. The letter attempted to reframe her betrayal as a midlife crisis that got completely out of control and included rambling explanations about how Alex had manipulated her vulnerability and convinced her that I was emotionally unavailable and holding her back from personal growth. "I know you probably hate me and have every right to," she wrote in handwriting that looked shakier than I remembered, "but I need you to understand that I was going through something I didn't recognize at the time. Alex made me feel like I was special and deserving of more excitement than our quiet life together, but I realize now that what we had was actually precious and stable and everything I should have valued." I read the 4-page letter once while drinking my morning coffee, felt nothing but mild curiosity about her current circumstances, then filed it away with the rest of our legal documents before taking Catherine on a weekend mountain retreat we'd been planning for weeks. The letter's desperate tone and attempts at psychological justification couldn't penetrate the emotional distance I developed, like reading about someone else's problems in a news article rather than hearing from someone who'd once shared my bed and promised to build a future together. Catherine and I spent that weekend exploring scenic overlooks and antique shops, discussing everything from her hospital's new pediatric wing to my plans for expanding the consulting business, conversations that flowed naturally between two people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company without hidden agendas or financial calculations. "Do you ever miss being married?" she asked during a quiet moment on a hiking trail, not probing for information but simply curious about my experience. "I miss the idea of what I thought marriage was," I replied honestly. "But I don't miss the reality of being with someone who saw me as a means to an end rather than a partner." My transformation from trusting husband to strategically minded individual who prioritized actions over words had made me more selective in relationships, but it had also given me confidence in my ability to handle whatever challenges life presented without losing myself in someone else's drama or chaos. I'd learned to trust my instincts about people's character, to set firm boundaries without guilt, and to recognize the difference between someone who enhanced my life versus someone who simply consumed resources while contributing nothing meaningful in return. Samantha's attempts to rebuild her reputation and financial stability were hampered by the criminal record, destroyed credit rating, and widespread community knowledge of her affair and fraud that followed her wherever she tried to restart her life. Through our former mutual friend network, I occasionally heard updates that painted a picture of someone struggling with consequences she'd never anticipated, working as a cashier at a discount store, living with her elderly parents who constantly reminded her of the opportunities she'd thrown away, unable to qualify for decent housing or credit cards due to the financial crimes on her record. She asked me not to tell you this, my former colleague Janet mentioned during a chance encounter at a coffee shop, but Samantha applied for a job at our insurance office last month. Had to turn her down because of the fraud conviction. She looked terrible, like she'd aged 10 years in the past year. I felt no satisfaction in hearing about Samantha's struggles, only a quiet gratitude that I'd responded to her betrayal with calculated precision rather than emotional desperation, allowing me to emerge from the wreckage with my integrity intact and a clearer understanding of what I actually valued in life and relationships. The most telling indicator of my emotional recovery was realizing that I could hear updates about Samantha's difficulties without feeling either vindictive pleasure or residual pain, just the detached sympathy you might feel for any stranger facing the natural consequences of their poor decisions. Catherine and I celebrated our first year together by taking a cruise to Alaska, where we spent our days exploring glaciers and wildlife preserves while planning the next phase of our relationship with the kind of honest communication and shared excitement that had been completely absent from my marriage with Samantha. "I love how you plan these trips down to every detail," Catherine said while we were watching whales from the ship's deck, "but you're also flexible enough to change course when something unexpected comes up. That's exactly the kind of partner I want for the long term." The contrast between Catherine's genuine appreciation for my methodical nature and Samantha's constant criticism of those same traits highlighted just how fundamentally incompatible Samantha and I had always been, despite years of trying to make it work through compromise and accommodation that had only enabled her sense of entitlement.